Hello, English readers, and welcome to our September live read along. I'm Lydie Bureau, and I'm an English teacher in France. I'm also the founder of Lydie's Book Club, in which I host live readings of adaptations of classics of literature and contemporary novels. So I tend to prioritize books that are written by women. And each month we read and explore a different book for all levels of English. And at the end of each reading week, I meet the members of the book club in a live workshop via Zoom to discuss the chapters read over that week. And this month, we are reading the B2 Upper Intermediate adaptation of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is the 2008 Penguin Readers edition. So it's an old edition. As you can see, the kind of old, um, a little bit outdated, kind of old cover, very well, it's not that bad. I mean, the cover is quite nice though, but I find that the new for example, if you look at Jane Eyre's adaptation, it's the cover is much more appealing um, than the old versions of Penguin Readers. Now they do beautiful covers. Look at this one as well. Nice. That's going to be for November. Not now. Okay, so if you want to know more about the novel, the original version of the novel, which is this one, so you can clearly see the difference between the adaptation here and the original book. Um, and don't be mistaken, in the adaptation, you have the whole story, but of course, it's very much condensed than the original compared to the original. So, if you want to know more about the novel and Daphne du Maurier's work, I invite you to listen to the podcast episode 24 that I recorded last week. It's called An Introduction to Daphne du Maurier and Rebecca. And it's available on Ladies Book Club YouTube channel and also on Spotify podcast, Read in English. Today, this is our second live reading session of Rebecca, and we're going to read chapters 3 and 4. And this Saturday, I will host the first live workshop session that will cover chapters 1 to 6. So if you want to attend this live session, you need to subscribe to the book club. And you can find all the information and upcoming dates of live readings and workshops and how to subscribe on my website. So you just click on the link in the description. And also, all the Instagram live reading sessions that I do are recorded. So if you're not able to attend the Instagram live, then you can watch here, like you're doing right now, the replay on YouTube or on Spotify as well, if you prefer this platform to listen to podcast and reading. And finally, I'm pleased to announce that you can now purchase the 3-part live workshop of Our Wives Under the Sea, which was our August live read along. We read this book in its original text. This is a contemporary novel written by Julia Armfield. And for that, you need to have an advanced level of English, a C1 plus C1 level minimum, because it's quite a complex plot. So once and for that, you don't need to become a member of the book club. You can just purchase the workshop, and once you purchased it, you will get, you have to create your login, and with that, you will be able to have access to a private space where you will be able to watch the videos and listen to them at your own pace whenever you want, really. And you have long-term access to it. So you can find the link in the description of this video as well. And this way it will give you an idea of what it's like to be part of Leaders Book Club and maybe learn one or two things along the way. So now, as I usually do, I recap the last chapters before I start reading the new ones so that we have everyone on board and you not lost in the reading. So yesterday we read chapter 1 and 2. So we met our narrator, who speaks at the first person, in the first person. So, which brings a sense of closeness with her because we know it's a woman. And this young woman um, is, we meet her at the point where, at the very beginning of the novel, um, she's dreaming or daydreaming of Manderley, the house where she spent a short time with Maxim de Winter, which we will know is going to become her husband. So at the very beginning of the novel, we meet her in this hotel. She's describing this hotel somewhere in a warm place, maybe in Europe, south of Europe. We're not sure, but it's not England because Manderley is a house, a very grand house in based in Cornwall, and and which is it in England and by the sea. And we know that she's not there anymore. She doesn't live there anymore. They had to leave the house. And we don't know yet why. But we know that she now lives in this hotel in somewhere, in some place warm. Um, so um, she describes Manderley um, as a place where she wished she had more time to spend there. It really feels like she fell in love with the place and she is very nostalgic of that time. And the famous and the first line, the opening line of the novel, "Last night I dreamed I went to Manderley again," is one of the most popular and most quoted. It's a very famous quote in English literature, and it says so much about how she missed the place and what it meant to her. And then she moves on to reminiscing her time in Monte Carlo when she was much younger and she was with Mrs. Van Hooper, this old lady, wealthy old lady who needed a companion. And this young woman, the narrator, seems to come from a middle class background because she's employed by this Mrs. Van Hooper. So it really shows that. And it also, Mrs. Van Hooper seems to be a regular client or a visitor in Monte Carlo because she is very known in this place, in this hotel. And in this hotel, there they meet the very, do they say it's handsome? Not that much. Not a very tall or very charismatic man, Mr. Maxim de Winter. And Mrs. Van Hooper knows him from her cousin or the man who owns Mandarin. I mean, Max de Winter is a well-known person in the in this society, very high in the high society amongst the rich people in Europe. So he's known, and his house, Manderley, is also very known. So here again, the presence, the importance of Manderley is very clear, even with this character, this Mrs. Van Hooper character. So we can clearly see that Daphne du Maurier has placed, or yeah, or has positioned this house as one of the main character in the story, although it doesn't talk. But people talk, all the characters talk about it in very fond or yeah, fond way, or um, they mention it quite often, and it reappears uh, many times in the novel. So here they meet. Max de Winter is sitting next to their table, and Mrs. Van Hooper calls him or just starts chatting with him, and and asks asks him if he would like to join them for coffee, and then he do they recognize? Yeah, and at first, yeah, and he agreed to sit with them. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, so they start chatting, and um, Mrs. Van Hooper is a character that is very intrusive, and she doesn't shy away from asking very personal questions, and and that puts Max de Winter in a kind of awkward situation, or it feels a little bit odd um, for him to have to ask all these questions. Um, Asking what are his plans, talking about Manderley as well, and all sorts of very personal questions. Um, and then we learn at the end of the first chapter that Mrs. Van Hooper is sick, and she's looked after with a doctor and the nurse. So this young lady, the narrator, um, has to just find a way to occupy herself without her, let her rest. So she comes down thinking that nobody will be in the living room of the hotel to have lunch. And there she meets Max Winter again in this dining room. And and then she sits at her table. She doesn't go to him because she knows that she's not in the same um, rank as him. Social class is very important here in this novel, and we know that um, this young lady, who is a companion, a helper, or an assistant, we would say, of Mrs. Van Hooper. So she knows her place, and she's too shy. She's much younger. We don't know yet her age, but we know she's young, and she doesn't um, dare um, going to address herself to Mr. Van, to Max de Winter. She doesn't go to him. So she sits at her table and then she drops, what was it? A coffee? Um, a bowl. Yeah, she knocks down the bowl of flowers, because maybe she got a little bit distracted because she noticed that that he was there from afar. She saw him, and then she probably got a little bit distracted by him. So she knocked over the bowl of flowers, and um, Max de Winter went to him. Hi, Kitty. Hi again. I hope your morning was okay. I hope that the meeting went well for you. Yeah, that's fine. I'm just doing the recap of the first two chapters that we read yesterday. So I'm about to start uh, doing the recap of chapter two. So you didn't miss anything. All good. Did you manage to read the chapters yesterday? Because you also caught up the reading. Great. Did you manage to read chapters one and two yesterday? Because I know that you caught up, I think, around chapter two. So I hope that you had time to read it. So he came to her as she was trying to clean her table and invited her at his table because um, she couldn't possibly keep eating on this at this table with the tablecloth being wet. So they sat together and had lunch. And then it started. The beginning of their relationship started from there. They started meeting, having dates, and going for car drive around Monte Carlo, and also yeah, and spend time together. So no, I haven't. I have to read chapter one and two, but I can read today. Okay, right. I hope you'll be able to not. I hope you're not gonna get confused with everything that happened. So here at the end of chapter one. So I'm being quick here. So there is this young lady. She is with this old lady in Monte Carlo in the south of France. Yeah, I forgot to mention that's in the south of France, and a very rich place, a place where there are a lot of rich people. And she meets there Max de Winter, a very wealthy man. He's known by people and by Mrs. Van Hooper. And while Mrs. Van Hooper is sick, this young lady, the narrator, has to kind of she meets again Max de Winter on her own at the hotel because they're both staying in the same hotel. And here at the end, they start dating, basically. He invites her because he makes the first move. She doesn't really. I mean, can you understand? We don't know her age, but we know she is much younger than him. But we don't know her age yet. Um, but she's much younger than him. So he invites her at his dining table, and invites her for a car drive and on multiple dates around, showing her Monte Carlo in his car, and having a great time together. And without even um, realizing it, she gets married. with him. She marries him because we know from Mrs. Van Hooper that Max de Winter, lost his wife a year ago. So he is a widow, right? So he's a widow, and he's described as very, um, although he's quite handsome and tall man, he's still stern, and you feel like um, he's not there is something mysterious about him, you see. So that doesn't really stop the narrator to spend time with him, and they get married. So they're gonna spend weeks, I mean, their honeymoon still in the south of France and perhaps north of Italy, and enjoy um, the beginning of their married life. And in chapter 2, this is where reality hits back, when Max de Winter take uh, the new the second his second wife, the young Mrs. de Winter, back to his house. So we will refer to her as Mrs. De Winter because we don't know her real name. So that's also an interesting aspect of this novel, is that we never learn her real name, only as we know her as Mrs. De Winter. That's it. So here they arrive in early May in Manderley. So I remind you that Manderley is the family home of Max de Winter, who is the heir who inherited the house because he's the firstborn son. You know, there's still the inheritance um, filiation that still that is perpetuated still at this time. And his sister is married and lives somewhere else. So, but they don't seem to be very close. So we meet them again so they arrive at Manderley, and the narrator, Mrs. De Winter, feels very much out of place because she arrives. Remember, she doesn't come from a wealthy background. So all of this is very new. Arriving in this beautiful house, having servants and business managers, people who do things for you, having a maid, all of this is new to her. So she's very uncomfortable. And she meets Mrs. Danvers, who is the housekeeper. And this woman seems to scare her a little bit. So she doesn't feel very comfortable. Um, or she doesn't appear very friendly to Mrs. De Winter. So it seems like she doesn't want to vex her or seem unkind to her. So she will follow her in the East Wing, which is a wing of the house that they refurbished, redecorated, because it was for a long time abandoned. And Max de Winter and his former wife used to live in the West Wing. But she doesn't go there. She is shown the East Wing, which is now all refurbished, redecorated, and it's Mrs. Danvers who is going to show her the place and, well, show her around. And she is described as a tall woman dressed in black with dark eyes and a white face. So very much like if you know the what's it called, the family I forgot, um almost like a vampire, almost like dressed in black. I forgot this very famous the family. Um, the kids. There is the hand. Oh, how's it? I forgot the name. If you've got the name of the family, that they are vampires. Not really vampires, but the girl is called Wednesday. The Adams family. Yes, that's it. Yay! Thank you, Kitty. Yes, we got it at the same time. Yes, they're all dressed in black. If you see the mother, she looks, it seems like she looks a little bit like that. Dark hair, dark eyes. I mean, it doesn't say dark hair, but she is dressed in black and has dark eyes and a white face. So doesn't seem to be very joyful and happy person at first. At first, yeah. So they meet. It seems like um, she's someone that is quite steady, a steady woman, like quite um, with strength, I would say, because it says that she took my hand. Hers was heavy and deathly cold. So doesn't seem to be very appealing here. And it feels like she's staring at her as well. Her eyes never left mine. So we can see that I saw that she's hiding something. You see, I saw a little smile of scorn on her lips. So she's doesn't seem to feel safe around her. Um, So they discuss, so Mrs. De Winter, the young Mrs. De Winter, asks a couple of questions about how come they have been refurbishing this house, and she learns from Mrs. Danvers that that he used to live in the West Wing with his former wife. Um, Rebecca, because we learn her name here in the second chapter, that she was called Rebecca. So the title of this book, The Dead Wife, First Wife. And she's, yeah, surprised that Max didn't tell her about it. So you feel like there is miscommunication or a lack of communication. Max de Winter seems to hide or to be secretive, you see, um, because he didn't tell her this. And yeah, it seems very much that she fears Mrs. Danver. Here she says on page 10, I could not let her see how much I feared and mistrust her. And still, she tries to be amiable, to be nice with her, and says, "Oh, I hope we will be able to be friend. We will be able, yeah, to be friends, and that that we will." managed to get on, basically. Um, so, but it doesn't seem like Mrs. Danvers has the same way of thinking, or that she wants to be friends with her as well. Um, so we so the chapter ends with Mrs. Danvers asking, uh, well, she's no, Mrs. De Winter actually um, says to Mrs. Danvers that she can just carry on with the arrangements of the house as she used to do when Max was gone. So as she used to do before they came back. So carry on as you did before. So she trusts her in a way to deal with the arrangements of the house and the dinners and everything, the planning the dinners and lunches and all sorts of in, requirements in a big house to run a big house like this. So she let her do her thing and manage the things for her. And Mrs. Danvers she likes to remind the new Mrs. De Winter that Rebecca, the first wife, liked to manage things contrary to her, saying that she liked to give orders herself. So, and that she used to hold parties and and have visitors around all the time. So here she puts her in a position where she tells her, "Oh, okay. Well, you definitely not like his first wife, who would run things and who would know how to run things, you see. So she puts her down in a way. It's very indirect here. She's being very intentional here, not to stay respectful, but still, you see how she phrase it. Oh, more than and Miss. Oh yeah, the house has been in my charge now for more than a year, and Mr. De Winter has never complained. It was very different, of course, when the first Mrs. De Winter was alive. There were many visitors then, a lot of parties, and though I managed things for her, she liked to give orders herself. So you see a different way to deal with the management of the house. So um, that's a first uh, approach here, comparison to a bit. So you can see already you learn a little bit about Rebecca's character and how different she is from the new Mrs. De Winter. And of course, she was already in the position where she felt a little bit out of place, and now she has even less confidence um, to to feel at ease in the house. Right. So that's it for now. So that's it for the recap. Now let's read chapter 3. Okay. The cottage in the bay. I had never realized that life at Manderley would be so orderly and planned. I remember now, looking back, how on that first morning Maxim was up and dressed and writing letters even before breakfast, and how, when I came downstairs, I found he had nearly finished. He looked up at me and smiled. You mustn't mind, he said. This is something you must get used to. Running a place like Manderley is hard work. By the way, my sister Beatrice has written to ask her husband, Giles, and herself over to lunch. I have expected she would. I suppose she wants to have a look at you. Today? I said, my heart sinking. Yes, she won't stay long. You'll like her, I think. She's very honest. If she doesn't like you, she'd tell you so to your face. I found this hardly comforting. I have a lot of things to deal with this morning. I have a lot of things to deal with this morning. I must see Frank Crawley, who looks after my affairs. I've been away too long. He'll be in touch. He'll be to lunch. He'll be in to lunch too, by the way. He picked up his letters and went out of the room, and I remember thinking that this was not how I had imagined my first morning. A little bit of disappointment here. It seems like the Max de Winter that she met in Monte Carlo a few months ago doesn't seem to be quite the same here in Manderley. She's discovering a new side of his personality. After lunch, Beatrice and I went out and walked around slowly on the smooth green grass. I think it's a pity you came back to Manderley so soon, said Beatrice. It would have been far better to travel Italy for 3 or 4 months and come back in the middle of summer. It would have done Maxim good too. Besides, being easier for you. I can't help feeling that it's going to be rather difficult for you here at first. Oh, I don't think so, I said. I know I shall learn to love Manderley. She did not answer, and we walked up and down across the grass. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a bit about yourself, she said at last. What was it? What was it you were doing in the south of France, living with some terrible American woman? Maxim said. I explained about Mrs. Van Hooper and what had led to it, and she seemed sympathetic but distant, as though she were thinking of something else. Yes, she said. It all happened very suddenly, but of course we were all very pleased, my dear, and I do hope you will both be happy. I wondered why she said she hoped we would be happy, instead of saying she knew we would be so. She was kind. She was sincere. I liked her very much. But there was a shade of doubt. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize it was my... I was so caught up in the reading. Oh, gosh. I scare myself. This is ridiculous. Okay. Where was I? She was kind. She was sincere. I liked her very much. But there was a shade of doubt in her voice that made me feel afraid. Poor Maxim, she said. He went through a terrible time, and let's hope you have made him forget about it. We are not a bit like each other. I show everything on my face, whether I like people or not, whether I am angry or pleased. Maxim is completely different, very quiet. You never know what's going on in that funny mind of his. I lose my temper easily, quarrel hard, and then it's all over. Maxim loses his temper once or twice in a year. And when he does, he really loses it. I don't suppose he ever will with you. I should think you're a calm little thing. It's a bit undermining her. Putting it down a little bit. She looked away from me, her hands in her pockets, and examined the house in front of us. You're not using the West Wing then, she said. No, we are in the East Wing. It has all been got ready, especially. Has it? I didn't know that. I wonder why. It was Maxim's idea. He seems to prefer it. She said nothing, but went on looking at the windows. How do you get on with Mrs. Danvers? She asked suddenly. I haven't seen much of her. She frightens me a bit. I've never seen anyone quite like her before. I don't suppose you have, said Beatrice. There is no need to be frightened of her, and don't let her see it, whatever you do. Did she seem friendly? No, not very. I shouldn't have more to I shouldn't have more to do with her than you can help. Of course, she's madly jealous. I was afraid she would be. Why? Why should she be jealous? Maxim doesn't seem to be particularly fond of her. My dear child, it's not Maxim she is thinking of. No, she dislikes you. She dislikes your being here at all. That's the trouble. Why? Why should she dislike me? I thought you knew. I thought Maxim would have told you. She loved Rebecca so much. Oh, I said. Oh, I see. When the Laces were living, Beatrice took my hand. Then the Laces is the last name of Beatrice's husband. So it's Beatrice and her husband, the Laces. Beatrice Lacey. So the Laces were living. Beatrice took my hand, then bending down, gave me a quick kiss. Goodbye, she said. Forgive me if I've asked you a lot of rude questions, my dear, and said all sorts of things I shouldn't. Politeness never was my strong point, as Maxim will tell you. And you're not a bit what I expected. She looked straight at me. You see, she said, starting towards the door. You're so different from Rebecca. So here again, the comparison with the first wife. We watched the car disappear around the curve of the drive, and then Maxim took my arm and said, Thank goodness for that. Get a coat quickly and come out. Never mind the rain. I want a walk. I can't stand sitting around. He called to his dog, Jasper, and we headed towards the sea. We soon came to a place in the woods where there were two paths leading in different directions. The dog took the right-hand path. Not that way, called Maxim. Come on, Jasper, old boy. The dog looked back at us, but did not move. Why does he want to go that way? I asked. I suppose he's used to it, said Maxim. It leads to a little bay where we used to keep a boat. Come on, boy, Jasper. He turned onto the left-hand path. This brings us to what we call the Happy Valley. There, look at that. We stood on the slope of a wooden hill, and the path ran on ahead of us into a valley by the side of a running stream. On either side were flowering bushes, pink, white, and gold, bending their heads in the summer rain. The air was full of their lovely smells. We wandered down into the valley. At the end of the path, the flowers joined above our heads. We bent down to pass under them, and when I stood straight again, brushing the raindrops from my hair, I saw that we were standing in a little bay, the stones hard and white under our feet, and the waves breaking on the shore behind us, beyond us. Maxim smiled down at me, watching my face. It's a surprise, isn't it? He said. No one ever expects it. It's so sudden. We walked on the shore, playing with the dog and throwing stones into the sea. Then we looked around and found that Jasper had disappeared. We called and whistled, but he did not come. Then, beyond the rocks to the right of the bay, I heard him. You hear that? He's over there. It is over that way. I began to climb over the slippery rocks. Come back, said Maxim sharply. We don't want to go that way. The fool of a dog must look after himself. He knows his own way back. I pretended not to hear and went on as best as I could, climbing and slipping over the wet rocks. Then, looking up, I saw with surprise that I was in another bay. A stone wall had been built out from it to form a little harbor. Where the woods met the shore, there was a long, low building, half boat house, half cottage, built of the same stone as the sea wall. There was a man on the beach, a fisherman, perhaps, in long boots, and Jasper was running round and jumping at him. But the man took no notice. He was bending down, digging among the stones. The man looked up at the sound of my footsteps. Good day, he said. Dirty, isn't it? He had small eyes, a red, wet mouth, and an empty, foolish face. He watched me with interest, smiling all the time. Digging for shells, he said. No shells here. Been digging ever since the morning. Oh, I said. I'm sorry you can't find any. That's right, no shells here. Come on, Jasper, I said. It's getting late. Come on, old boy. But Jasper was noisy and stupid, running around after nothing at all, excited perhaps by the wind and the sea, so that he would never follow me. I turned to the man who had bent down again to his useless digging. Have you got any string? Eh? Have you got any string? No shells here. Been digging this morning. Since morning. And he whipped his pale blue watery eyes. I want some string for the dog. He won't follow me. Eh? He said, and smiled his foolish smile. All right, it doesn't matter. I wondered if there was any string in the boathouse and walked to it. To my surprise, the door was not locked, so I went inside, expecting to find the usual nets and boating equipment, but I was in a proper room with tables, chairs, and a bed pushed against the wall. There were bookshelves with books in them, cups and plates, and on the shelves little model ships. But no one lived here. It was cold and very dusty. I did not like it. I opened the door at the end of the room. Here were the ropes I had expected. A sail or two, paint pots, and on a shelf, a bowl of string and an old knife. They would do. When I came out of the cottage, not looking behind me, the man was not digging any more. He was watching me. Jasper at his side. I bent down, and this time Jasper allowed me to tie the string to his collar. I saw you got in there, the man said, staring at me with his narrow, watery eyes. Yes, it's all right. Yes, it's all right. Mr. De Winter won't mind. She don't go in there now, he said. No. She's gone in the sea, hasn't she? She won't come back no more. No, she won't come back. I never said nothing, did I? No, of course not. Don't worry. He bent down again to his digging, talking quietly to himself. I went across the stones and saw Maxim waiting for me by the rocks, his hands in his pockets. I'm sorry, I said. Jasper wouldn't come. I had to get some string. He turned sharply and started towards the wood. I'm sorry, I was such a time. It was Jasper's fault. It kept he turned sharply and stared towards the wood, and then she talks again. I'm sorry, I was such a time. It was Jasper's fault. He kept running round the man. Who was he? Only Ben. He's quite harmless, poor devil. His father was one of the farm servants. Where did you get that string? I found it in the cottage. Maxim did not reply. He walked very fast, and the path was steep. Come on, Jasper, make him walk. Come on, Jasper, make him walk faster, can't you? Can't you? Pull that string. It's your fault. You're walking so quickly. We can't keep up with you. If you had listened to me instead of rushing off over those rocks, we wouldn't have been home by now. We would have been home by now. Jasper knew his way back. I can't think what you wanted to go. I can't think what you wanted to go after him for. I thought he might have fallen or hurt himself, and I was afraid of the tide. Is it likely that I would have left the dog if there had been any danger from the tide? I told you not to go on those rocks, and now you're complaining because you're tired. They're arguing here. Anyone would be tired walking at this speed. I thought you'd come with me when I went after Jasper instead of staying behind. Why should I run after the miserable dog? You just say that because you haven't got any other excuse. Excuse for what? Excuse for not coming with me over the rocks. Well, and why do you think I didn't want to cross to the other bay? Oh, Maxim, how should I know? I'm not a mind reader. I know you didn't want to, that's all. I could see it in your face. See what in my face? I've already told you. I could see that you didn't want to go. All right, I didn't want to go to the other bay. Would that please you? I never go near the place, or that miserable cottage. And if you had my memories, you would not want to go there either, or talk about it, or even think about it. There, I hope that satisfies you. His face was white, his eyes watering, and with that dark, lost look they had. Lost look, his eyes watering with that dark, lost look they had when I first met him. I put out my hand to his and held it tight. Please, Maxim, please, I said. What's the matter? He answered roughly. I don't want you to look like that. It hurts too much. Please, Maxim, let's forget everything we said. A stupid, senseless argument. I'm sorry, dear. I'm sorry. Please, let everything be all right. We ought to have stayed in Italy, he said. We ought never to have come back to Manderley. Oh, God, what a fool I was to come back. So we might think that they're in Italy. You remember at the beginning they are not in England anymore. So perhaps they are in Italy because it can be a warm place, definitely. So yeah, we could imagine that. So that's the end of chapter 3. So now we're going to start with chapter 4. Okay. The shadow of Rebecca. The next day, I met Frank Crawley on the drive. He took off his hat and smiled. He seemed glad to see me. I smiled back at him. It was nice of him to be glad to see me. I liked Frank Crawley. I did not find him dull, as Beatrice did. Perhaps it was because I was dull myself. We walked along together. I was down in one of the bays the other day, I said. The one with the little harbour. Jasper was behaving badly, running round that poor man who seemed so foolish. You must mean Ben. He's always on the shore. He's quite a nice person. You need never be frightened of him. He would not hurt a fly. Oh, I wasn't frightened, I said. I waited a moment to gain confidence. I'm afraid that cottage place will be ruined, I said lightly. I had to go in to find a bit of string to tie up Jasper. It's so cold and wet that the books are all getting spoiled. Why isn't something done about it? It seems such a pity, such a shame that this cottage is all falling apart. I knew he would not answer immediately. He bent down to tie up his shoe. I think if Maxim wanted anything done, he would tell me. Are they all Rebecca's things? Yes. What did she use the cottage for? It looked quite lived in. I thought from the outside it was just a boat house. It was a boat house originally. He sounded uncomfortable. Then then she changed it. Had furniture put in and books. Did she use it much? Yes, she did. For moonlight swims and one thing and another. It's being very vague here. What fun! Moonlight swimming must be lovely. Did you ever go? Once or twice. I pretended not to notice how quiet he had become. He clearly did not want to speak about these things. What is the little harbour for? The boat used to be kept there. What boat? Her boat. A strange sort of excitement was on me. I had to go on with my questions. He did not want to talk about it. I knew that, but I could not be silent. What happened to it? Was that the boat she was sailing when she was drowned? Yes. He turned over and sank. She was washed overboard. What sort of size was it? Pretty small. It had a little place to sleep in. What made it turn over? It can be very windy in the bay. Couldn't someone have got out to her? Nobody saw the accident. Nobody knew she had gone. They must have known up at their house. No, she often went out alone like that. She would come back at any time of the night and sleep at the cottage on the shore. Did did Maxim mind her going off alone like that? He waited a minute and then shook his head. I don't know, he said shortly. I felt he was being loyal to someone, either to Maxim or to Rebecca, or perhaps even to himself. I didn't know what to make of it. She must have been drowned, then trying to. She must have been drowned, then trying to swim to shore. Yes, I imagined how the little boat would rock from side to side, and how the water would suddenly rush in, and the sails push her down. It must have been very dark out there in the bay. The shore must have seemed very far away to anyone swimming there in the water. How long afterwards did they find her? About 2 months. 2 months? I thought drowned people were found after about 2 days. I thought they would be washed up when the tide came in. Where did they find her? Near Edgecombe, about 60 kilometers up the coast. How did they know it was her? After 2 months, how could they tell? I wondered why he paused before each sentence, as though carefully considering his words. Had he cared for her, then? Had he minded so much? Maxim went up to Edgecombe to see the body. He recognized her. Suddenly, I did not want to ask him any more. I felt sick. I hated myself. And there was an awkwardness between us that could not be ignored. Frank, I said, oh, hopelessly, I know what you're thinking. You can't understand why I asked all those questions just now. You think that I'm interested in a rather unpleasant way. It's not that. It's only that sometimes I feel myself at such a disadvantage. It's all strange to me, living here at Manderley. It's not the sort of life I'm used to. I know people are looking me up and down, wondering what I will make of it. I can imagine them saying, "What on earth does Maxim see in her?" And then, Frank, and then, Frank, I begin to wonder myself, and I have a fearful feeling that I should never have married Maxim, that we are not going to be happy. I know that they are all thinking the same thing, how different she is from Rebecca. So here we can clearly feel or see how she feels the heaviness of being compared to Rebecca, and the weight of being Mrs. De Winter, how and what it means to be Mrs. De Winter. Frank turned to me. I stopped breathless and already a little ashamed of myself. Frank turned to me, looking very troubled. "Mrs. De Winter, please don't think that," he said. "Cannot tell you how glad I am, please. I am that you have married Maxim. It will make all the difference to his life. I know you will make a great success of it. And if people round here make you feel that they are finding fault, well, it's most terribly rude of them. I've never heard a word of it, though." "Thank you, Frank. What you say helps a lot. I expect I've been very stupid. I'm not good at meeting new people. I've never had to do it. And all the time I keep remembering how it must have been at Manderley before, when there was somebody here who was born to it and did it all naturally and without effort. And I realize every day that she possessed the things I like. I lack confidence, beauty, brains, all the qualities that mean most in a woman. It doesn't help, Frank." He said nothing, but he went on looking anxious. "You must not say that," he said. "Why not? It's true. You have qualities that are just as important, far more so. In fact, I don't know you very well. I'm not married and I don't know much about women. But I would say that kindness and honesty, and if I may so, modesty, are worth far more to a husband than all the brains and beauty in the world." He looked worried still. "I'm sure that Maxim would be very disturbed if he knew how you felt. I don't think he can have any idea of it. You are fresh and young and sensible. You have nothing to do with all that time that has gone. Forget it, Mrs. De Winter, as he has done. Thank heaven. And the rest of us. We none of us want to bring back the past. Maxim least of all. And it's for you, to lead us away from it. Not to take us back there again." So here he's telling her that she needs to make her own path. and not mirror Rebecca or reproduce or run the house as she used to do, but she needs to do it her own way. He was right, of course. Dear good Frank, I ought to have told you this before. I feel happier, much happier, and I have you for my friend, whatever happens, haven't I, Frank? Yes, of course. Frank, before we put an end to this conversation forever, will you answer just one question? Very well. I will do my best. Tell me, I said lightly, as though I did not care a bit. Tell me, was Rebecca very beautiful? Frank waited a moment. I could not see his face. He was looking away from me towards the house. Yes, he said slowly. Yes, I suppose she was the most beautiful creature I ever saw in my life. We went up the steps, into the hall, and rang the bell for tea. And I rang the bell for tea. So that's the end of Rebecca. And I just want to say one thing. Here in this passage, it really mirrors or reflects on the fact that beauty still today is very important, and I hope that will change or is going to we will at some point put the focus on other qualities in women, but even comparing to ourselves, women, we we put the focus on beauty and the fact that beauty is everything, you see, or that it's a very important factor in women's attributes, and and it's something that we have to fight against because this patriarchal society always put women against each other, and putting in comparing and in putting forward beauty and placing standards of beauty in the forefront of magazines and certain standards of beauty. And for women who don't pay attention or who are out of the beauty standards or don't look like the beauty standards or uh, do not want to be reduced to their beauty or to be considered only from that lens, sorry, then it's hard. And we can see here in this early 20th century novel that this character, this Mrs. De Winter, this young woman who is kind of discovering life here and very naive on things, is comparing herself to this woman and to the beauty of this woman that it's put forward each time that people talk about her, and and being very much influenced by other people's perception of Rebecca and how it affects her confidence. So you can see here, although there were no social media at the time and probably very few magazines, we can see how young women, whether they're teenagers or young adults, are very much influenced by women, even at the beginning of the 20th century. So yeah, it's it. So you see, we are um, um, we how do you say? I forgot the expression, but we still hold this social construct of women and beauty and how we compare ourselves to others that we have to deconstruct, and it takes it's gonna take time and years, and because we hold on to this for a century, you see, and to deconstruct that these standards or this way of approaching women and valuing women for other things than their beauty is a hard work. But yeah, so we'll see how she evolves and how she moves away from this comparison with Rebecca. But yeah, it's going to be a journey. So I hope you enjoyed the reading, Kitty. I hope you're following the plot, that you're not lost in the story. I hope you feel okay. And I hope you guys enjoy this video and this reading. Thank you for watching. Thank you for attending the live. And I wish you a beautiful end of the day. Make sure you subscribe to the book club membership to attend our first live workshop of Rebecca this Saturday. And I will see you tomorrow for session 3. We will read chapters 5 and 6. Bye. Bye bye.